First of all, welcome to our first webinar for Making STEM Connections 2017. And I wanted to let you all know that we are recording this webinar, and it will be posted as a YouTube video on the Making STEM Connection website later this week. So if you would like to rewatch the webinar, or if you have colleagues that were not able to watch this tonight, I know we have some schools that have conferences and other teachers that have sports practices, then they can watch that through the YouTube channel that we will have the link to that posted on the Making STEM Connection website. But as we're going through today, if you have thoughts or questions, ideas that you want to put out there, please feel free to do that into the chat box. And I have some colleagues here that are going through that, and they can help to monitor that, and they can also pass those along to me if it's something that I can directly address for you. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to look at safety and safety in the classroom. But before we start with that, I want to give you some examples of some making activities that you could be using with some of your students. So every time we have a webinar, I will try to bring one or two items for you to see. These are all things using the materials in the kit, and they might be new ideas or suggestions of ways that you can use that with various student groups. So I've been hearing a lot about a couple of things. One is felting. I am getting lots and lots of pictures of teachers and students felting whole classrooms, which is super, super exciting. The other thing I see a lot about is fusing plastics. It's all the rage. I told you all it would turn into an addiction, and that's where it's at. I currently have a box of plastic at my desk that a colleague has left there because she knows how committed I am to fusing plastics. So I wanted to show you another example of something that you could do in terms of fusing plastics instead of just using plastic bags. So I have a couple of examples to show you. One of them is plastic straws. So this is a package of straws that I got from IKEA, and what I like about it is that the straws have all these various colors. And what I did is I cut the straws into little pieces, and then I put those pieces between the two pieces of parchment paper, just like we did for plastic. And here is the result that I got. So it's one solid piece. It almost looks like confetti pieces. And you could now cut this. So you could turn this into something like a bookmark. It could have a specific shape. It could be for decorative pieces. It could be a building component to something that your students are using. So any kind of leftover straws, these ones just happen to be colored. So you could certainly match colors to things like school colors or holiday themes or something specific to a project that you're working on. And then just cut those straws into these little pieces and then put them between the parchment paper and fuse them together to create a plastic piece. I also, while I was doing that, took the straws themselves and just fused the straws together. So these are the ends of those straws that I cut, and you can see that it is a solid piece, but it is still flexible. So you could create another kind of plastic piece using the straws as a straight, lining them up or putting them in different angles and not cutting the straw, but just fusing it with the parchment paper and the iron as is. I will tell you, when using this kind of plastic, this thicker plastic, you need to have the temperature on the iron at a higher temperature. You don't need steam, but you want to put it on high so that it really gets to melting this thicker plastic. Okay, so that's one option. Again, you'll never look at a straw the same. You'll notice straws that have different colors, different diameters to them. Imagine what a bendy straw might look like when it gets fused together. So another option that I have is using plastic containers. So for example, these kind of containers that you might get snacks from at the store might have rolls in them. This had puppy chow. I sacrificed for you all, I hope you know, and purchased one of these, and I did eat the contents, but just so I could have the plastic container. The plastic that is used in this container can also be fused. And we can go back to the shrinky-dink days of our youth and use the plastic like that. So I want to show you some examples of how we did that. So here are some pieces, and I'm not sure if Aaron can get this very well. We'll see if we can get some good contrast. So this is a piece of that plastic that I put between the pieces of parchment paper, and it turns into a solid disc. You could cut this afterwards. It would be a little bit more challenging, but you could drill into it to create holes. But you could also cut it into a different shape before you fuse it. You could also add color. So I have a couple examples. Here is, again, I'm not sure how well the contrast will come. Looks good? Okay, so these are some plastic pieces that I colored with Sharpies before I fused them or before I melted it, and we get some different shapes. So this one actually, and maybe it looks better this way, but it says SCI on it, and it has a hole. And that hole I punched with a paper punch before I fused it, and then you could make your own little key ring, for example, or something to attach. Students could put their names on here and then put it with something so that it's designated as their personal item. I also got really excited and started fusing plastic bottles. I don't know where to go with this, but I had plastic there and I thought, well, let's see what happens. So you could smash some plastic bottles and fuse that to create something or to get the bottle to have a new or different shape, different purpose. And this one I thought was really fascinating. So this is just a larger piece of the plastic. And while I was fusing it, I let it bubble and change shape. And it created this three-dimensional object that you could use as an art piece. It could also be a screen or act as a window. You could shine light through here. So imagine if you colored this and then you shone light through it, then you could get different colored lights projecting onto a wall or onto a screen. And the plastic itself becomes very hard and very firm. So similar to when we use the plastic bags, this becomes almost a new material that you could build with or that you could use. So instead of throwing away your straws, instead of throwing away your plastic containers or bottles, this could be another option for what you do with those materials. So I'm excited for you guys to try this. Let me know if you work on this with your students.
Permanent or washable marker?
I used permanent marker. I've also seen people use colored pencils, but I didn't get colored pencils to mark very well on mine, so maybe if it was a different kind. But the permanent markers seem to work really well to create that. And a different kind of marker might give you more of an opaque. So try the washable marker and see maybe how it turns out, or if it gives you a lighter color to the plastic. One, I would suggest if you're trying to get a specific shape, to cut the shape before you fuse it, because after you fuse it, the plastic becomes very hard and it's very difficult to cut it or manipulate it. So if you're looking to put a hole in it, or you would like it to have a certain shape or different kinds of edges to them, I would cut that into the plastic first and then fuse it. I will also tell you that the plastic is very flexible once you first heat it. So remember when we were fusing plastics, and if you peeled away the parchment paper, the plastic was still really soft and warm? This will do the same thing. So if you're trying to fold it or roll it or get it to conform to a certain shape, after you fuse it, then you could force it to be into a particular shape, or a three-dimensional shape if you were looking for, while it's still warm. But remember, the plastic will be warm, so be careful with students touching it directly. You could, of course, wear the safety gloves to protect your hands if you need it.
What about scrap?
So the 3D filament, many people tried to use that at the trainings to fuse that with the plastic, and that 3D filament, for it to be melted, has to be over 200 degrees. So if you put the iron on a really high setting and you put it under there and let it sit for a while, you might be able to get that 3D filament to form into the shape that you want. It will get soft, so then maybe you could manipulate it. Again, be careful because it will be really hot, but it needs to be over 200 degrees in order to do that. Any other thoughts or questions? One of my colleagues is going through those for me. So she's letting me know if you have any additional thoughts or questions. I love these kinds of projects because these are items that you would probably throw away. And this is a way to upcycle them. So to turn them into something new, create a new object or purpose out of something that might otherwise be thrown away or have to be recycled. So I think that there's a lot of applications for this, and I'm excited to see things that you and your students try. So please share. Okay, so we're gonna, a couple of things too, before we move on. I wanted to talk to you about the framework that some of you have already received it, otherwise you should be receiving it in the next week or so. And so I wanted to explain it to you so you understand what you're receiving. When you get this in the mail, and it will be coming either by itself or with any of the items that you didn't receive already in your kit, any items that you might have missed. When you pull out your framework, this is what it will look like. And this is important. There's some items under the cover here that I would like to point out. First of all, there is this sticker, this adhesive sticker, and it is a warning sticker to go onto the cart to remind you to not have the drawers of the cart open more than one at a time. So it's good to have this on the cart so it's visible by anybody who is using it, to remind them to only have one drawer open at a time and to keep it locked when it's not in use. There's also a larger sticker, this Making STEM Connection sticker, that you can put with it, so that you understand that that cart belongs in the classroom, so that other people that might be working in your building or your facility don't think that it belongs to somebody else, because it's an actual tool chest or workbench. So these two stickers, once you get them, go ahead and put those onto your cart in a place that would be really visible. If you always have the cart backed up to the wall, don't put this on the back of the cart, because then no one's going to see it. Maybe put it on the side or one of the drawers up front. Okay, so those are the two stickers. Also, what you will see underneath that front cover are these safety cards. They are punched with a hole so that you could put them in one of the binders that you received, the 3-ring binders that you received in your kit. Or if you want to split them up according to different people using different materials, so if you're sharing your kit, you could do that as well. We're going to talk about some of these cards today, and what are some of the safety issues for you to look at. But it's always good to keep these with the cart or the materials that are in the cart, so that anybody who is using it or facilitating an activity where students are using these tools can be aware of the safety issues to keep in mind. So these are the safety cards that also come with your framework, with your kit. And then you will have the framework itself. So this we highlighted at the training. We showed you last year's version of it. It's been updated. And so this has in it the 8 different lesson prompts that we were discussing at the training, including the safety one that I sent to you earlier this week. And so we will address that one today in our session. I'm going to show you where it is right here. So you can see that is the lesson prompt that was sent to you. And you will also find in here a parent letter. You will find some references to standards. You will find some assessments in the back. And when we're talking about the assessments, there was always a student version of the assessment as well as an instructor or teacher version of the assessment. And the assessment is really based on the 4 C's, and that's how you will see it organized. There will be a separate sheet for collaboration, and one for creativity, and one for critical thinking, and one for communication. So each of the C's will have its own assessment sheet, and there will be a student version of that for the appropriate grades, and then there will be a teacher version of that for the appropriate grades. How you use those assessments are completely up to you. You might ask students at the beginning of a project or at the end of the project to take the self-assessment to see where they are, and they can mark themselves accordingly, and then maybe at the end have them retake that assessment to see how their understandings or their confidence, their skills have changed. You could have students utilize the student one and you fill out the teacher one, and then you could look for discrepancies that are in there. So you might find a student who maybe feels like they're not doing quite, where they would like to be for communication, and you feel like they're actually doing pretty well. So you could have conversation with that student saying, I noticed that you talk with the people in your group and you listen to those that are offering suggestions. I think that you are doing, better in communication than maybe you judged yourself at. So however you would like to use these assessments, they do not need to be turned into us. They do not need to be turned into the Governor's STEM Council. These are purely for your use if they support this kind of application in your classroom. So the framework, the curriculum framework here will be a wonderful resource for you. And I would like to remind you too that these are not student handouts. Making is not about creating a copy of a lab and handing it to the students and asking them to recreate the exact same thing that somebody has already done. It's about inspiring students to think on their own, to solve their own problems, and come up with a solution or idea that maybe you as the teacher haven't even thought of yourself. So the framework or the lesson prompts themselves are really designed for you. They're support for you on how to inspire the students that you're working with, how to guide them, how to facilitate their learning. So you can use that, again, yourself to read through and think about, for this lesson, what is the appropriate usage for the students that I'm working with? Should I use the novice level? Should I use the practitioner level? And then your students, you would explain to or somehow provide that information for the activity to your students, and then they would progress from there. So it's not a handout to be copied and given to your students. Are there any questions that you have right now about the framework, the use of it, safety cards, or anything else that has to do with the kit at this point? Okay. Well, if something comes up, again, please feel free to put that into the chat room. And again, Renee is here and she'll be going through that and she can let me know if something pops up, if you have anything further you'd like to ask. So I'm going to show you a few slides in our PowerPoint as we begin to talk about safety in the classroom and what it looks like. So I'm going to switch over for just a little bit to the PowerPoint. And we're going to talk about that lesson prompt, that safety lesson prompt that I sent to you in the email and is also in your framework. I would like to remind you about how the lesson framework is set up, this lesson prompt. So remember, at the beginning of every lesson, there is a title and there is a general explanation of the activity and the theme. And then below that, you will see instructional objectives, you will see guiding questions, and you will see literacy connections. Sometimes those books are in the kit and sometimes they're not, but they're just ideas or suggestions that might be appropriate for your students. On the right side, you will see a quick reference to standards. This is just a general highlight. And then below that, you will see a list of vocabulary terms. And those vocabulary terms will be highlighted throughout the lesson in a different color, like blue. So they'll kind of pop out to you so that you can see the use of those vocabulary words. Then as you continue on, if you flip to those next pages, then you will see the different versions of the lesson itself. And it's broken up into these 4 different levels. The novice level, which would be grade banded to be K1, maybe 2. The practitioner level, which might be grade 2, 4. The apprentice level, which could be grade 4, 5, maybe 6. And the expert level, which could be 6th grade and above. How you choose which level or how to use these different versions of the lesson is completely up to you. You may have 5th graders, but you start with the novice level as an introduction to the lesson, and then progress to the apprentice level as a follow-up or as an assessment for that lesson. You might have 4th graders that are very comfortable doing the expert level version of that lesson. It's completely for you and or your students to decide which one is appropriate for you, but we wanted to give you some variations on the same theme. So on the safety lesson, what I wanted to highlight for you is how you and your students can go through together and discuss what are the items, the materials, the tools that are in the kit and how they are to be safely used. So in the novice level, what you will see is that students are going to create a safety stoplight. And that safety stoplight has 3 colors, just like a regular stoplight. And they would, together with you, go through the items that are in the cart and determine which things in your maker's kit are on green light, which means they can go. They can use it anytime they want. They don't have to ask. Some of these items might be on yellow or whoa, which says you can use them, but first you must ask the teacher or the instructor. And then some of the items might be put on red, which is stop, saying that you can only use these items with an adult or a teacher supervising your use of them. So you and the students together can go through the items and kind of put them on the stoplight or associate a color with them so that the students understand what they can use and maybe what they can't yet use freely. The stoplight can change. Those colors can change as the year goes. You might have students who feel very comfortable with the hot glue gun and it might move from red to yellow as the year goes on. Again, that is for you and your students or your class to determine. The practitioner level kind of takes that same idea up a notch and comes up with descriptions, written descriptions of way to properly use that tool. The apprentice level expands on that idea and looks at careers that are involved in safety. So having students do some research into things such as OSHA. What does that mean? What is that word? And people that work for OSHA, what is their job? What is the importance of that job in safety? And then in the expert level, what you will see is that students can make videos about that tool and how to safely use that. And I have some examples here to show you of some students that use this idea, did the expert level last year. This is from a teacher in West Des Moines. And so I'm going to show you some really quick examples. I'll do this part now. I'll come back to this. Okay, so I'm going to show this video and it should come up on its own. And hopefully you'll be able to hear it.
That's high temperature and low temperature. High temperature is going to be really hot. Low temperatures probably works for most things. Never touch the hot end of the glue gun. Just hold your hand over it. If you can feel the heat, it's hot. Glue goes in the end right there. Push it in as far as it goes.
Why is there smoke coming out?
And then you use the trigger after that. You got to give it a chance to. It's going to take a while for it to get melted.
Take your hands away from like where it is, and then when you use it, don't touch the silver part where the hot glue comes out, because then it's really hot.
Okay, show me what it looks like when it's coming out of the gun.
When it comes out white, so it's like crystal. It's like that.
Clear, you mean?
Clear, pretty much. Then that's what comes out of it, and then when you leave it there for a couple minutes or something, for secs, it gets cold and then it gets really sticky. Use a glue gun. You really need to be super careful where you put it, because if you accidentally put your hand on the hot glue and it's not even cold, you'll get your hand full of it and it's really hard to take it off. So there's an advantage of getting it stuck on your hand really hot.
I cut this in pieces so I could chew one at a time. So I'm doing two, I'm putting it over here, and then I'll just twist it out of here and
a 5th grade student from Crestview Elementary that's in West Des Moines, Clive area. And you're going to see him again in this subsequent video. And what's fascinating is he made this last fall. And what this student created was a voting booth. So the school had a mock vote last year during the presidential election and had students and parents come and place their vote into this voting booth. And so the students created this voting booth in their makerspace. So what you're going to see in this next video is how that student deconstructed his booth and took it apart. Something to notice, he is going to be using the carpenter's knife that is in your kit, that's in your toolkit. And I want you to listen to his lesson that he learned and how to properly use this.
Always cut in a direction from your body and avoid cutting at angles immediately. Close the blade when finished, and when not in use, only extend the blades as far as needed to cut through objects. Keep the blade sharp as a dull blade may pull, making it more likely to cause the blade to slip and potentially cut your fingers. Like what I got right here.
What did you do? Tell me about that.
So I did not follow this rule that time. On accident, I was just cutting. And like I said, don't cut in angles. So I went like this, and I cut myself right there.
Ouch.
I started gushing because it was open.
So what would be the right way to cut this box? We're going to use this box over.
Like this and take my hands away from the object. Like that's what I did last time. And then here, that's the ducky. The nice thing about box cutters is that literally they cut so easily that you don't even need to like have to like push and puff and stuff.
So to avoid cutting the carpet, it's a good idea to put it on something.
Because if you put it on the carpet, it's going to cut screens, and then kids are going to like start to want to pull them up, and then teachers are going to tell them not to. So, yeah.
So then what do you do?
I just cut through here, and then this one. You want this panel, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I like how you stepped aside.
So what I really like about this video is, first of all, the young man is himself demonstrating how to use the tool. He admits to not using it properly and getting injured from that. He got a cut, but he's all good. He's all good. And the teacher is showing him how to safely use this tool so that he can use it again in the future. And I know that's very scary for many people to see a young person using such a sharp object. And there is a possibility of injury. There is a possibility that they could cut themselves. And what we're going to talk about for the rest of our time today is how to limit that possibility of injury, but still empower our students to be able to use these tools. So think about the transformation in that student going from having used it improperly and then learning how to properly use that tool and being able to apply that to his future uses. Again, notice you didn't see the teacher in any of these videos. So while she was recording, she is allowing the student to demonstrate the use. So this would be an example of how to use the expert level of the safety lesson. Any thoughts, questions, or comments? Oh. So could you check your computers and make sure that you have muted your computer so that we don't have background noise for other people that are listening?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just
I think we can maybe take care of it on this end as well. Wonderful. Any other thoughts about at least what you've seen so far about safety and the videos and things that you saw this student doing? If you have questions, again, go ahead and put those into the chat room, and then we can hopefully address those as we go through. So the next part that I'm going to bring up, I'm going to have a guest speaker in our webinar, which many of you are familiar with, Patrick, who helped with a lot of our trainings over the summer. And Patrick had the glorious opportunity of really writing the safety lesson and the safety cards. So Patrick is going to come up here and talk to you a little bit. I brought a variety of tools and pieces of equipment that are in the kit. And Patrick is going to talk to you about how to appropriately use those materials in the classroom. So the question was floor ideas for how to protect the floor and how to protect the tabletop when you're cutting and using hot tools. So for those of you who received the cart, the large cart, this is part of why we chose that cart, because it has the wooden top to it. So when you're using a cutting tool, or if you're using a heating tool like the soldering iron or even the hot glue gun, I advise that you use that surface. Another option would be maybe a scrap piece of plywood that you could put onto a desk or onto a surface. You could also paint on that if you were wanting to add color. And Patrick's actually going to demonstrate for you. We talked about at the training the idea of the miter box, that you could affix the miter box to that wooden piece that's on the top of your cart, but you don't have to. You could put that onto a separate piece of wood and then use the clamps to put that onto another table. So Patrick is actually going to talk about that here as part of his demonstration.
All right. So I know that we've covered a lot of these topics already in the training itself, but we wanted to make sure that we reiterate some of the safety components that we want to make sure that people are aware of, and we're kind of setting up our table right now. So one thing that I want to make sure that we do is I don't want us to get to May and then we've never touched the soldering iron, or we've never touched the hand tools, or we've never touched the hand or the power drills, because this is how we are going to be able to become both confident as well as by using that caution and by having that communication. So the first thing that we're going to do is look at our soldering iron. I know that some of you probably were brave and tried this for the first time at the training. So just to reiterate, we have our soldering iron, we have our soldering iron stand, and then we also have our sponge. Now again, you wet the sponge a little bit to kind of clean off the soldering iron after you have worked with the solder. A couple other things that we may have shown at the training itself is, of course, you have your solder, but also these things called helping hands. These helping hands are basically, this is one that we created. Actually, it was our makers through our summer program that created this. It's just a block of wood that had a couple holes drilled into the base, some wire that they wrapped around, and then they soldered and also hot glued some of the little clips from the alligator clip wires to that. And so what's great about this is that you can actually plug something into the, well, I'll just demonstrate. You can actually affix something to the alligator clip, hold it, so therefore you're hands-free, so you can have your solder in one hand and your soldering iron in the other as you are soldering. So something like this, you can purchase things like something like a helping hands, but again, you can also make stuff just out of a scrap piece of wood and some of the tools that you have in your maker's kit. Some other things to remember: always use your safety glasses or the goggles itself, and then we do have this year with the flame resistant or heat resistant gloves as well. These are also cut resistance that I think Jolie may have demonstrated with the box cutter also. So these are another safety device or safety measure that we included in the kit, and we want to make sure that you are utilizing this stuff as well. So I know that there were several pairs, I think 6 pairs of the safety gloves in the kit as well as the goggles. So make sure that when you are soldering, you are properly ventilated in the room. If you want to have a fan going, that's great. If you want to be by a window, that's fine. Make sure that you have that space to work, as well as the safety materials for the soldering. So I'm going to keep on kind of going along. I know that you are able to also have different chat. If you have any questions about a specific tool, that you can mention that in the chat, and then we can address those as we go on. The next item that I want to bring up is our wire strippers. Do we have any wire with us? Oh, thank you. Yes. So we have our wire strippers. Our wire strippers are going to be one of your friends. That's why you have 6 of them. You'll notice that there's lots of different areas up here that are different size areas that you can strip the wire, okay? Make sure that when you're using the wire strippers that your fingers are clear of that, because there is a sharp edge right at the base, and then lots of different and different options for you for the different sizes of wire. And then you have the little teeth right at the end. So one thing, if you're going to cut wire, you're going to go all the way to the base of it, and you're going to snip. Okay. So again, it's basically just a pair of scissors at the very base of it. Okay, I'll do it one more time. So stick the wire into the very base of it, and it's basically a pair of scissors. And then from there, you just choose which size of wire you have. So this one is at the very end. Might be a little bit too, there we go. So here you just kind of crimp it, and basically you're cutting that plastic coating around the wire itself. So you're just kind of rotating it around, crimping that plastic coating, and then you can grab it by the end with the teeth and gently pull off. Let's crimp it one more time. This is a perfect science. And there you go. I don't know if you were able to see that or not, but basically you're just exposing the wire. So you're stripping that plastic coating to expose that wire that's on the inside. Now you do have that hookup wire in the white box that is in your kit as well. So you have different sizes of wires, as well as different colors of wire to practice with. That's the main thing, is just get it out, try it out. The more you do it, the more comfortable you'll be at stripping wire. And again, stripping wire is important if you're going to solder, to make those battery packs and those circuit blocks that we demonstrated at the training itself. So that is our wire strippers also. So again, if you have any questions, make sure you just voice that in the text box or in the group chat. All right. Jolie, can you go get the miter box, and we'll do that in just a bit. All right. A couple of other things I know Jolie mentioned in the video. There was the student that was talking about the hot glue gun. These are low temperatures. There's actually a different setting on it, but they are low temp hot glue guns, and they actually, if you unplug them, they actually stay warm for a few minutes afterwards that you can still use them for. So they are low temperature, but of course make sure that when you're working with anything such as the hot glue gun or the soldering iron, that you are very careful to stay away from the metal components, and I'll only use the plastic pieces as well. I know that the student demonstrated that on the safety video that you saw just a little bit ago, but wanted to reiterate that with the hot glue gun. All right. So one thing I do want to show before we start with the handsaw is that everything in your kit does have some level of safety that needs to be addressed by it. Everything from the soldering iron and the box cutter, but also as something as simple as the tape dispenser, or even just the serrated edge for the aluminum foil. Every component has some safety measure that you do need to address with your students. Labeling some of those as that green label, or for a go, as in anybody can use that, or making sure that there is some level of communication before students are able to utilize the components in the kit. I understand that there are components of the kit that you may still be nervous with using. It's perfectly acceptable, perfectly fine, and we just want to make sure that you feel comfortable in using those components before you put those in the hands of the students. Like I said, something as simple as the tape dispenser does have that serrated edge, and I do have to tell this quick story. that a couple weeks ago we had a bridge building competition at the Science Center where we had hand saws, coping saws and box cutters in the hands of the students that were building the bridges. And we had our first aid kit ready and available at any given moment. We had 2 Band-Aids that we had to distribute, and both of them were because of me. I cut myself on the tape dispenser, and I cut my knuckle with it. So anybody can cause injury to themselves with almost any item that's in the kit. We just ask that you have that communication with your students ahead of time, as well as having that caution, being aware that I have to use a certain tool slower, or I have to be aware of it that I'm using it, as well as building that confidence for it. So just wanted to point that out, that anything can cause a Band-Aid, can cause a need for a Band-Aid. All right. So we talked about a little bit about the miter box. Now, we had the miter box attached to our cart itself. Our travel cart had a wooden top to it. So this is, obviously, we don't have our cart with us, but this is just the wooden top that is from one of our traveling carts. So we had mentioned that if you don't want to attach your miter box directly to the top of your surface and have it screwed down to the cart itself, you can just buy a piece of plywood or some other block of wood, attach the miter box to that, and then attach that block of wood to a table. So that's what we're going to demonstrate with this. Is basically we have just a random piece of wood that we attached our miter box to, and then you can use your clamps to clamp that down to the table. Again, with the clamps, we have our release lever at the top right here, which is what my thumb is on, and that's allowing me to slide back and forth. And once I have it in the appropriate spot, I basically just give it a little squeeze and it cinches up. Okay, so that release lever is what my thumb is on again, and it allows it to slide up and down. So I'm going to go ahead and attach it to the table, and then I'm going to give it a good squeeze to really solidify it to the table. And as you can see, the only thing moving is the laptop on the table. So again, with our miter box, we have our hand saw. We do ask that you please use 2 hands on the handle of the hand saw instead of, I know it's very tempting to put your hand here or to hold the block of wood while you're sawing. We do ask that you keep, we suggest that you have 2 hands on the saw blade at all times while you are making those cuts. You can use the other, another set of your clamps to actually clamp down the block of wood. So again, you have the release lever where my thumb is, able to make it slide, and then you just go ahead and clamp it down, clamp the wood down. Another thing that we did demonstrate in the training itself is that it's always, another safety precaution is to flip this around and have the arm pointing away from you, so that way you're not sawing right next to it, and so your hand or your arm could be potentially scraped on that. So if you are able to go ahead and have that arm facing away from you, and again, your block of wood would be inside the miter box. Now the miter box is great because it allows you to cut straight angles as well as straight edges, as well as having different angles. So this would be at a 45-degree angle right here, and you basically just line your saw up and slowly just let the saw do the work. That's the hardest thing for students as well as adults to understand, is that a hand saw is not quick. It does take a lot of patience. So that's why we used the cardboard tubes as an example. Let gravity push that saw down into the block of pine or the block of maple or the cardboard tube that you are using. Don't start off with something such as a strong wood such as like oak, because it is going to become very frustrating very quickly because it takes a long time. If you feel like it's not cutting appropriately, it might just mean that you're putting too much force down onto the cardboard tube or too much force down onto the block of wood. So again, just go nice and slow and don't push down. Let gravity push do the work for you on that. So again, I know we demonstrated this at the trainings, but I wanted to make sure that that we did demonstrate this again, because I know that this is one area that some people might be a little bit nervous of using. This is a fantastic way to do any type of structural support building. I know that we use cardboard tubes on a lot of our cardboard forts that we have at the Science Center. but lots of different ways that you can utilize the handsaw with building and construction. So, all right. Felting, yay! Now, I didn't bring an iron today because I know that most of you have probably used an iron before, either in school or potentially in your daily lives. But be always aware of your iron, making sure that you are aware of when it is plugged in, when the surface of it is getting hot, how it is stored, making sure that it's upright and not left down on the ironing board or another surface, especially a desk. And also be aware of any plugins that you have as well, making sure that people are free of walking where those wires are going, with your power strips and different things, making sure that people are either tape those down or in an area that people are not going to trip over those wires. That we want to make sure that we eliminate tripping hazards for one, but as well as reduce the potential injury of knocking something down onto them, especially if it's an iron. So, all right, we have our felting activity. Now, I know most of you fell in love with felting. I know that it took me a couple times, but then once I started doing felting myself, I quickly found the addiction, just like everyone else. We want to make sure that we review this one more time. With felting, it's always best to have a piece of cardboard and or your lesson framework to use, so you're not felting right on top of the table. We want to make sure that you are protecting the table. So if you do have a small piece of cardboard or even a block of wood or some other something else that you can put underneath the foam, that's going to protect the surface. Now again, with felting, we're not asking you to jab it down necessarily. You're just nicely teasing that wool fabric, and you're not sticking the needle into the foam very deep. But again, that piece of cardboard or something underneath is going to protect the surface of your table if it does go a little bit deeper than what was than what was planned. Again, like we said, you're not stabbing it. It's not a voodoo doll or anything. You're just nicely. I think Jolie used the term of this might have been before me, but teasing your hair. So it's not before me. It's just that I never teased my hair. So just make sure that you are doing that in a nice gentle motion as well. And like I said, it's not a voodoo doll. So just make sure that people are aware of where their felting needles are. It's a great way to store it right into the foam itself, or of course put it back into the storage container for the felting needles. Now, felting needles are not considered a consumable item necessarily, but they do break. So be aware of how long those felting needles are. You might have to look at purchasing some new felting needles if once they do break. Of course, that's with most anything in the kit. Drill bits are not non-consumable, but eventually drill bits do become dull, and sometimes they do break. I broke one a few weeks ago when I was drilling a hole to replace my gate on my fence. So just know that those things are going to happen, and make sure that you are keeping that inventory ready, so you have the materials that you need accessible to all the students. All right. So, actually, I'll start with this kit. Now, you do have 6 of these toolkits also. These toolkits has a wide variety of lots of different tools. I don't know if you can see all the different components of there. I know Jolie did point out the utility knife, the box cutter right here. If you are nervous about the box cutter or the utility knife, we do ask that you are paying attention to the extra blades that are here as well. Just be aware that those are in the kit as well. We had mentioned that there's lots of different components in here that can potentially be harmful, as in you can get a cut from many of these tools. We have our wire cutters right here that obviously can pinch you and cut your skin as well, but so can a tape measure. So just be aware of when all the tools are being used, because sliding the edge of a tape measure across your skin can potentially cut some people. So make sure, like I said, you are having that caution whenever you have any of the materials out, as well as having that communication ahead of time. I know that on the hand tool cards, have you shown the hand tool cards already? Okay.
Well, I showed the cards.
Okay. So the safety cards that Jolie mentioned, there's one specifically about hand tools. You'll notice that the utility knife is on there. You'll notice the wire strippers, the wire pliers, the tape measure. Lots of different hand tools are included on that. Even a hammer. We want to make sure that people are aware that yes, you can smash your finger, but at the same time we have this very sharp claw on the other end. So be aware. Like I said, I'm saying this over and over again. Have that caution. Understand what tools are being used. So making sure that you have that communication, because that's the only way that with those two, that's the only way we're able to build that confidence level with our students as well as with ourselves. So again, our toolkit, we have Allen wrenches in here, which are fantastic. We have our screwdrivers, pair of scissors in here as well. So just go through this with your students, kind of basically how we did as well, and try out just hammering in a nail. Not all students have hammered nails before, so you might have to guide them through that process. You can use the power drill to teach them how to drill a hole as a starter hole for the nail for the hammer. So lots of different ways that you can incorporate different tools with the safety cards as well. So, how much time do I have? Okay, perfect. All right, the 3D pen is up next. This is another hot component. This will be on the safety card as well as the iron, as well as the glue gun. So this is in the soldering iron itself. This is another component that does have a very high heat component to it. When it is plugged in, really, I know that most of you did try this out at the training, but really the only component that you have to have caution on is the very tip right here. That is where the filament is at its hottest, because that is where it is coming out of the 3D pen itself. So be sure that you are aware of where your fingers are placed, and also where this is being laid down at, making sure that it's not being laid down on a table, making sure it's not laid down on any piece of fabric. We do want to make sure that we are being mindful of where that very hot tip is, just like the hot glue gun or the soldering iron or the iron itself. Just like the soldering iron, I'm actually just going rogue on this because I haven't even thought about this, but you could potentially use the soldering iron stand as a holder for your 3D pen as well, if you want to have something like that as as another holder. You could potentially even make one of these. You don't have to use this exact holder, but another purpose for the soldering iron stand could be for your 3D pen. So, yeah, I thought so too. All right. Now, how many of you all have tried out the 3D pen? I can't see anybody raising their hand, but I hopefully all of you have tried out your 3D pen, because it is one of those components that takes practice. Don't get frustrated with it. I know that everybody was wanting to start off with making the Eiffel Tower in 5 minutes, hoping to have a completed Eiffel Tower. And when you pulled, whenever you finished up, you realize that you may have one little square finished of the Eiffel Tower. It does take time. It takes practice. It's not going to be perfect the first time. So make sure that you are practicing with that, making sure that you are building that confidence level with that, and just making sure that you are reiterating that with your students as well. So.
And someone else said to make sure.
Yes. Yeah, let me actually get that back out, because that's a great suggestion and great reminder for people, is that there is a forward and a back button to the 3D pen. The comment was making sure that you back out the filament at the after you finish up. So there is a reverse button. So there's a forward and a reverse arrow on the side of your 3D pen. When you finish with the 3D pen, making sure that you go ahead and reverse all that filament out using the back arrow. You might have to actually give it a little bit of a tug to get that started, but you're going to be reversing out the leftover filament once you're finished, and then making sure that you unplug it as well. So that's a great great reminder for people. As far as, there was another question of, is there anything that you can put on the surface of the table to protect the table from the 3D pen? You can put down wax paper, the parchment paper that is in the kit itself, as one idea, and that's probably what I would suggest right off the bat. There's probably other things out there, but I know that is a component within the kit that you can use. And again, you won't have to. You're not covering the whole table necessarily with parchment paper to use the 3D pen in this one area, so you should be able to get by with a small piece of that. I know that there were some questions in the training also about where can I get some templates for the 3D pen. If you just if you Google 3D pen templates, I know there are some free resources out there that you can print those off. Definitely laminate them. Because that is something that if you put a 3D filament on top of a piece of paper that is not protected, then you're not going to be able to peel it off. So make sure you do laminate those templates also. But that's another opportunity for you to expand the number of designs that you have for your 3D pen.
So I've had a lot of people ask me about the templates that we used at the training. And so here's my official answer on that. Those templates that we used were for a different 3D pen, which was an okay pen, but I didn't like it for what your uses would be in the classroom. So I chose a different 3D pen, but I liked the templates from the original one. So I cannot officially give you all copies of that because that goes with the other pen. But if you email me, I'm sure I could direct you to how to get those templates, and I could certainly help you with that. And as Patrick was alluding to the parchment paper, if you have a design even that your students themselves draw, or if it's the logo for your school or something else, you can lay the parchment paper over it, and the parchment paper is opaque enough that you can see the design through it. Then you could trace over that with the 3D pen. And remember, what's really great about parchment paper too is you can use it over and over and over and over again. So you don't have to keep using a new piece of the paper when you fuse plastics, or even use it to be underneath your 3D pen. You can just keep using the same piece of paper over.
Great. Now I want to reiterate again with these safety cards. As Jolie has already mentioned and has already shown you, these different safety cards, everything from 3D pens to hot temperatures to sharp objects, the Dremel tool, electronics, various hand tools, all of these are meant to, here are some things that we've identified that might be some things that you need to be aware of. The various hand tools, as I mentioned, the needle nose pliers, hand saws, hammers, screwdrivers, wire cutters, and tape measures. That's what we have listed on the hand tool safety cards. That does not mean that this is all encompassing and that there's nothing else that you have to be aware of. These are just some items that we have identified that we wanted to point out as something that may or may not be always thought of as something that might need to have some more attention to. So again, just wanted to reiterate these safety cards. There is some really great information on these, partly because I had a hand in creating these, but also making sure that you are aware that it's not all encompassing, that there are components that you may feel you need to have a little bit more communication with your students, and they may or may not be listed. All right. So we are going to go on to the hand drill. That is one thing that I want to make sure that I spend a little bit of time on, because I know that some people tried out the drill, some people weren't able to try out the drill. Jolie, do we have a second piece of block, or is it just the one piece of block that we have? Okay. So what I'm going to do with the block of wood is I'm going to use the 3D pen box. So imagine this is another block of wood. When you drill into one block of wood, always be aware of what you're drilling into. Oh, thank you very much. Yeah. That's probably, this block of wood is probably less expensive than this 3D pen box. So, all right. Always be aware of what you're drilling into. Obviously, this is a pretty thin piece of block of wood, and if I just started drilling into it, it's very possible that I would drill right into the table. And then that's perfectly fine if you're looking on the tabletop of your maker cart. We kind of expect that tabletop, wood tabletop of your maker cart to have drill holes and hammer bangs and scuff marks on it by the end of the year, or even by the end of the week. But we want to make sure that we're protecting the surfaces of our desks at our schools. So always make sure that if you're drilling into one block of wood, that you have another block of wood underneath it, so that way you're protecting the tabletop. Now with the drill itself, there are the indicator lights on the side. I don't know if you can zoom up real quick. That is going to tell you your battery life. So I'm going to give it a little bit of squeeze. You can see that 3 lights lit up. So that is just telling you how much battery power you have in your drill itself. Perfect. What I was just squeezing with my index finger was the trigger. So that is what is going to give power to the power drill. One thing to point out also is that we have these arrow buttons. So this arrow is actually pointing out away from the drill. So it's pointing toward me. If I flip the drill on the other side, you'll see one pointing toward the drill. So it's pointing forward. If it's pressed in, if that arrow is pressed in, it's going to go forward. That means that you're going to be drilling down into the block of wood. If I push that back arrow in, it's going to go in reverse, and so it's going to reverse out of the wood. If you have it toggled in between, so I just have it a little bit depressed on either side, that's going to be a lock for your trigger. And as you can see, maybe I'll go this way. With it depressed halfway in on both sides, I can't squeeze that trigger any. It's only whenever you fully depress or press the lever in forward or reverse is whenever the collar is actually going to spin. Okay. Now there's 3 parts of the drill that I want to highlight up here. We have the chuck collar, which is this piece that's closest to the drill itself. We have the chuck body, which is the piece that freely turns. If you you'll notice that the chuck collar only turns a little bit. It kind of wiggles back and forth. The chuck body freely spins, and the chuck body actually will have the chuck jaws, the 3 pieces that are coming out of the chuck body. That's going to control that. So if you turn the chuck collar one way, you'll notice that the chuck jaws are coming back into the drill. If you turn the chuck body the other way, you'll start to see those chuck jaws starting coming out of the chuck body. Now the reason why that's important is that when you attach a drill bit, now I'm going to use the largest drill bit that we have. I'm going to attach that right into where the chuck jaws are. You can see that it's not, the largest one is not going to fit. So what I'd have to do is actually bring those chuck jaws back further, what's going to cause them to become wider. Then I'm able to slide my drill bit in. What you need to do at that point is then tighten up to make sure that you have the chuck jaws have a tight grip around that drill bit. So what I'm going to do is do that with a smaller one so you can actually see the chuck jaws come out a little bit more. All right, so I have a little bit smaller size of drill bit. I'm going to turn the chuck body, which again is the large piece that freely moves. I'm going to spin it. I'm actually going counterclockwise, and it's pulling the chuck jaws out. Okay, I'm going to test to see if I can slide that drill bit in. It's a little bit wider, so I'm going to actually go with a smaller drill bit. So I can slide that in. It's a little tight, so I'm going to pull them back just a little bit. I'm able to slide it in, and then I tighten it up just by giving it a nice little squeeze. Okay, now that does not mean that you're ready to start drilling. That just means that it's now clamped down loosely. You need to make sure that you have a tight grip on that. So what you do is making sure that I have a great angle here so you can see it. All right, so you're going to hold on to the chuck collar, and you're going to hold that, and then you're going to give the chuck body a nice little turn. Okay, and that's going to clamp down on that drill bit. So again, you hold the chuck collar, and you turn the chuck body with your fingers, or with your hand, and that's going to clamp the chuck jaws around the drill bit. Okay, to loosen it, again, I have my hands firmly on the chuck collar, which is this component. I'm going to grab the chuck body and give it a nice little turn, and then going to be able to release the chuck jaws. Okay, I'm going to do that one more time. So again, chuck collar, chuck body, chuck jaws. I'm going to firmly hold on to the chuck collar, slide the drill bit in, and then turn the chuck body, and then give it a nice little clamp down. Okay? That's what's going to set your chuck jaws around the drill bit itself. If you don't have it tightened down like that, all it's going to do is just spin, and you're not going to be able to have a good, clean drill hole into your block of wood. Now, I know a lot of you have used a power drill before. I don't want to discredit any type of knowledge that you have about a power drill already, but I do want to make sure that you are aware that how we are instructing this is that you tighten it with your hand instead of holding it with your hand and then squeezing it. I know a lot of times, my dad, myself included, what I'll do a lot of times is when I'm working at my house is I'll just hold on to the chuck collar myself with one hand and then give it a squeeze, and that's going to turn that chuck body really fast. Oh, sorry, I was looking at the wrong one. That is going to work, although that's not how we are instructing it with our students. Sometimes it's really hard to break those habits. What we do at the house is sometimes not what we want to do in the classroom. So again, we are instructing people to give that clamp down with your hands instead of squeezing the trigger. Again, so whatever you feel is best for you, your situation, and your students. I just want to make sure that I'm not discrediting any type of knowledge that you have, and also in your situation. Whatever you feel like your students are capable of doing, we want to make sure that you're putting them in the safest and the most appropriate situation as well. So that is our power drill. I know I spent a little bit of time on that, but like I said, some of you are very familiar with power drills, some of you are not. Also I do want to point out, to charge it, you do have the little port at the very base of it. Again, this drill was selected because of it's a lighter weight power drill. It does not have that large battery pack that attaches to the handle itself, which is going to create a lot of weight to it. So by having the charger station here, you plug it into the wall, charge it overnight, it's going to be fine. It's going to be great basically for the entire day, unless you have it running for 8 hours of the school day. So just being aware of that. So like I said, if you have questions about the power drill, make sure that you are asking those on the live chat, because we want to make sure that we are preparing you not only as a group of makers across the state, but also individual makers across the state. And like I said, we all come to making with a lot of different levels of expertise in different areas. I know that I have mentioned that I relearned how to sew last year using the sewing machine. And so some of those skills that we bring to the table, we're able to elevate a little bit higher, and some of them we are learning for the first time, like soldering, or felting. All right. Now I think, is this the last one, Jolie? Is the Dremel? All right. So a couple things with the Dremel. Do you have the little case? It's in there. Perfect. Thank you. No, a little bit with this Dremel is, I have to be completely honest. I don't have a Dremel tool, and I was super jealous that everyone was getting a Dremel tool, and I didn't have one myself. The Dremel tool is attached to the 4.8 version. Yeah, 4.8 version. So if you have that 4.8 version, you got the Dremel tool. And like I said, I just had to be honest that I was kind of jealous of everyone. So something that I want to point out with the Dremel tool is, if you're not familiar with using a Dremel, practice. Don't bring it into the classroom. We would not do a science experiment outside the first time necessarily in the classroom. We typically practice those to make sure that they are safe and we know what those reactions are going to be. We ask that you do the same thing with making. Practice at your house. In a safe environment, making sure that you know how to handle the tools or any activity that you're doing prior to going into the classroom. So a couple things to point out that I wanted to make sure that everyone with the Dremel tool is aware of is that you have an instruction manual, and if you're like me, you only look at the instruction manual whenever you can't figure it out yourself. IKEA furniture, I typically don't look at the furniture instructions until the very last moment when I have to take it apart because I realize that I missed a couple steps. What I want to point out though is page 16, 17, 18, and 19. These are going to include different, basically tell you what these different tools are used for. So you have different sanding items, you have different drill bits, you can purchase a whole bunch of different Dremel accessories, but page 16, 17, 18, and 19 really talk through what you have available as well as what you can also purchase. What I would suggest doing is just start out with practicing. Start out with practicing with a sander component, which is what we're going to do in just a bit. So again, with the Dremel tool, it does need to be plugged in, so be aware of that. You do have 2 speeds. This is our on-off switch, the little blue lever on the side, so you can go to low and high. I would suggest starting off in the low setting, just so you are aware of what it's going to do before you start. It's kind of like with the sewing machine, is you want to, everyone starts off, they push the pedal down and it takes off, making sure that you go a little bit slow at the very beginning. All right. So we have our bit. So this is our Dremel accessory. This is a sander bit. And so this can be used to sand wood. It can be used to sand different soft metals, plastics. So if you are printing something with a 3D printer that you might have, or potentially even with the 3D pen, this could be something that you use to sand off those rough edges. Now, again, with a 3D pen, it's pretty thin, so you may not want to use this thicker one. You may want to choose a smaller sander bit as well. So just some components that I want to go over, and I'm going to use my little cheat sheet here to make sure that I am calling it exactly the same that you see it in your book. Because when I talk about this is the little lever that you push to lock it. Well, it's actually called the shaft lock button. So I want to make sure that I use that terminology. So at the edge here, we have our shaft lock button. That shaft lock button is going to basically lock the collet. Okay. This is not the collar, it's called the collet. Okay. The collet is basically, if you think back to the chuck jaws that grips a hold of the drill bit in the drill, the collet does that same thing. It's basically a little screw device, basically, that's going to tighten around the bit that you're putting into the Dremel tool. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and drop in my my bit. I'm going to go ahead and tighten it up just a little bit, and you can see that it's freely spinning. Okay. When I press in that shaft lock button, I don't know if you heard that or not, but if I push in the shaft lock button, that collet is no longer freely moving without moving the accessory. Okay. If I don't have that plugged in, I can freely move that collet around. Okay. So the reason why that's important is that if you press in the shaft lock button, it's going to lock the collet, and then you're going to use your little wrench that comes in the kit, and you're going to tighten it down. Okay. Think of this as I just put my hand on the collar. The chuck collar. Thank you. I was forgetting what the word is. Basically, I've just put my hand on the chuck collar, so my thumb is depressing in the shaft lock button, which is the chuck collar. This component, the collet, is basically the chuck jaws that are gripping around the drill bit. Okay, so if that's an easier way to remember that, it's basically you're tightening up the Dremel the same way that you would with the power drill. And then at that time, now you have a good grip around the accessory itself, you can go ahead and turn on low. Again, very important that you are not necessarily grabbing a hold of everything. What we suggest is using your the clamps again to clamp down the block of wood that you're going to be using. Then you're able, and then of course always use the safety goggles as well. You can see that mine is not plugged in, so I'm not going to be actually using it today in the studio, but making sure you are aware of those safety components as well. Okay. Now, one thing that I want to point out is just like in the safety cards, we talk about motors, we talk about things that spin. This is going to spin just like this. The chuck body spins on the power drill. The collet is going to spin as well as the accessory is going to spin very, very quickly. Okay. Be aware of if you have long hair, if you have the strings for your hoodie, sweatshirt, or potentially a necklace or something, that those aren't dangling down, because this is going to be a pretty high speed rotation. And those, just like in the DC motors, or also with the power drill, things like that can be caught up in the collet device as well. Again, it's almost, the Dremel is brilliant because it's almost just like a pencil. So you can basically use this to sand off small edges. You could sand in your a design or your name, or basically have a depression of what you want to build with the 3D pen. So there's lots of different components that you can do. And again, you can use wood. Again, what I would suggest doing is using a softwood, such as maple or pine. You can also look at different plastics. And I've never tried this, but maybe even styrofoam. I don't know how that would work, but maybe you would be able to create a design out of styrofoam or something like that as well. Potentially even cardboard tubes. You could maybe make some depressions into the cardboard tubes. Now, in the little packet of different accessories, you will see a couple different drill bits. You'll see some different sanding devices. Like I said, check out page 16 and 17 in your instruction manual, because that's going to highlight and give you a picture of what all those different components are and what you can use those for. A lot of them, again, are made for woods and soft woods and plastics, but some of them you can use on soft metals as well. So, all right. So that is the Dremel lesson. Again, a lot of it is taking time, experimenting yourself, practicing with it yourself, making sure that you feel that you're building that confidence level through caution and through that communication, making sure that you feel confident before you pass this on to the hands of one of your students. A couple things just to point out: we do have the ventilation for the Dremel itself, so around the sides you will see some ventilation. That's basically because of the motor spinning and working on the inside, that it has to breathe. So making sure that you are aware that there is going to be some puffs of air that come out of there as well. But yeah, and as you build that confidence, then bump it up to the high level. Like I said, start with the low, get that steady flow, and see how the machine works, and then once you build that confidence, boost it up to the next level. So, again, if you have questions, make sure that you are entering those into the chat so we are able to address those as well.
Patrick, I wanted to add too that with the Dremel tool, you can get additional attachments, and some of those attachments can be for cutting. So you could get a special tool for cutting PVC pipe or other types of materials, so that you don't necessarily have to have a handsaw. There's an engraving bit that's in there, so you can engrave wood, you can engrave metal, ceramics, other types of things. And once you start using a Dremel tool, you will find how useful it is. And it's a very common tool used by makers in general because it has so many different applications to it.
Definitely. Yeah, great. All right. Well, I am going to turn this back over to Jolie for a little bit. She has some more things to add. But like I said, if you have questions, we want to make sure that you are feeling confident in your maker's journey. So we are always here for you. That is something that we want to make sure that you realize that we are a resource for you. If you have questions about certain tools or how to use certain components, feel free to reach out. But you might also find that there's people in your school community, as well as just your community itself, that might have some expertise that you can also reach out to as well. Like I said, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. We'll probably be talking about safety in future webinars as well.
Thank you, Patrick. Patrick is the one who always gets to do the fun stuff, which is safety. And It's one of those things that we need to incorporate in all of our lessons, all of our activities, and at all times, so that students recognize the importance of always being safe, so that we can use the tools as the way that they were intended, and protect ourselves at the same time. So if you ever have questions about how to use the tools, you're welcome to email us. You can also call me, and I can either give you some specific answers or I can make references to you. The internet is an amazing place. If you go onto the internet, Dremel is a brand name for that tool. And if you go to the Dremel website, they have a ton of project ideas, suggestions, things that you can do with the tool. It's very similar to Instructables. So people design a lesson or a demonstration of how they use the Dremel tool and all the different attachments to do a variety of things. So the Dremel tool is something we added this year. It wasn't an option for the kit last year. So I welcome your thoughts and ideas and any projects that you use the Dremel on. I'm excited to hear what you guys are going to do with it. So a few things as we are nearing the end. I want to grab a book here just a moment for you. If you look on the Invent to Learn book that you received at the training, this was in the green bag that you took with you after the training itself. This book has, on page 170, it has a section on safety, and they discuss some things to think about, both in terms of communication with parents and the way that these materials are used in the classroom, kind of some standards for using them with students. So I highly recommend you look through that book. In all of these webinars, I'm going to reference different parts of the book, the Invent to Learn book. It's a very excellent guide, really, a how-to book of creating a makerspace in a learning environment. So it's chocked full of lots of information, examples, and references to how different people have been able to infuse the maker mindset into their learning space. Another resource, I probably went a little too far, is the Makerspace Playbook. So this right here, this this document can be found on the Makers Ed website. And let me see if I can get it to go to there. And then you can download it as a PDF, and then you can print off a version of it, or you can just look at it yourself. Just to reference it. And we will also be referencing this playbook throughout all of our webinars. It is chocked full of ideas and examples and suggestions of ways to really embed the maker movement with the students that you are working with. And it is a youth book. So it is designed to look at how do we use these kinds of tools with students. Can you show the website? I surely can. So it's at makered.org. And then when you go in /makerspaces/, and then from there you will see the link to the playbook. So again, we will reference this throughout the other webinars so that you can see specific pages that are in here that will apply to that theme or that idea. And, oh, I had it in there twice. One last idea, we won't necessarily take the time to watch this video, but I'm going to, we're going to watch a little bit of this video just to reference it. This is one of my favorite TED Talks, and it's about the 5 dangerous things you should let your children do. And just the title alone is extremely scary. The gentleman who was hosting this TED Talk actually wrote a book about the 50 dangerous things you should let your children do. And we're going to watch just a little bit of it. You can see the YouTube link that's on here. You can certainly just search it up for the 5 dangerous things. So we're going to watch just a little bit of this to kind of get some insight into what he thinks are these dangerous things we should be letting our students do.
I don't have a lot of time. I prepared 18 minutes of presentation. We're going to do it in 8, so get ready. First off, I want to talk about danger, and I'm going to need a volunteer. Okay, I'm kidding, but here's the thing. My wife and I wrote this book, 50 Dangerous Things, and if the slide guy backstage could get my speaker notes up here, because there's a couple of numbers that I need to refer to later, and I've already forgotten them. We wrote this book, and a child psychologist in Australia said that the book was actively encouraging children to participate in activities that could scar, maim, and kill. And this is without ever having seen the book, never read it. He completely missed the point, that the book is actually about safety. So, let's look at topic number 1 in this book of scar, maiming, and killing. Take something like lick a 9-volt battery. Now, raise your hands if you have licked a 9-volt battery. Okay, this is a good crowd. Okay, raise your hands if you're going to lick one tonight. Yeah. We chose this as the first topic in the book because we thought that everybody would have done it. Wrong. It turns out that ideas about the risk of licking a 9-volt battery include things like death by electrocution, burn your tongue off, permanent loss of sense of taste, and the actual risk is harmless. Now, according to the Centers for Disease Control, who kind of track these kinds of household accidents, there has never been not one single recorded incident of anyone being injured by licking a 9-volt battery. So where do these kinds of mythic false perceptions come from? And I think it's pretty easy to see where they come from these days. I don't have to tell you how much the media loves a story about a child in peril. People in Kazakhstan were watching this story unfold at 3 a.m. their time. Is it any wonder that children in our society are overprotected? This kind of inundation of stories about children in peril and danger creates the illusion that children are actually in danger. And our perceptions of risk are based more on hearsay and news media confabulation, really, than any rational analysis. And to talk about this, and this is for you, Aaron, I've coined a new term, dangerism. I want you to remember this term. This is based on the word carnism, which was coined by Melanie Joy in her book, Why We Eat Pigs, Ride Horses, and Pet Dogs. I've screwed that up. Sorry, Melanie, but it turns out that our family histories and our cultural context and our personal experiences in childhood and so forth have more to do with how we perceive danger than the actual measurable risks involved. And like our phobias and our choices about which animals to eat, there may be no rational basis for this. And this has gotten to the point where our fears are so tainted by this exposure to the media that the top 5 things parents are worried about in regards to their children, and you'll notice ninjas aren't on here, do not overlap at all with the 5 things that children in America are actually dying of. And what is so criminal about this is that the thousands of hours we spend talking to children about stranger danger would be so much better spent encouraging them to get outside, doing family interventions, teaching them how to swim. None of these things make for glamorous news stories. So to combat this avalanche of unfounded fears and equip children to better handle the real risks of the real world, I present for you 5 more dangerous things you should let your children do. We can counter this rampant fear-mongering by deliberately creating opportunities for children to learn to recognize and mitigate risk. And here they come. Number one, walk to school. Car accidents are the number one cause of death for children in the United States. And you can reduce that risk greatly simply by reducing the amount of time spent in cars. Now, the number one fear of parents in this country is kidnapping. Kidnapping by a non-family member doesn't even make the top 5,000 things that harm children. But studies show that children who walk to school are better judges of character, have better situational awareness, and so are therefore less likely to be victimized. And the habit of walking pays dividends over a lifetime. Improved memory, consistent exercise habits, independence, and a long-lasting sense of well-being. Number two, climb trees. When children engage with natural play structures, they exhibit greater cognitive engagement. This is a classic study out of Germany. More attention is paid to the activity. And unlike a jungle gym, the tree requires you to figure out how to climb each moment of it. Each spot in a tree is unique and presents a unique set of challenges. The child must also take and demonstrate responsibility for themselves as they ascend up there out of reach of their parents. And there's this unique sense of freedom that comes from being up in the top of a tree. Number three.
We're gonna stop there because you can certainly watch the rest of this on your own. But I really like what he introduces there at the beginning is what are the actual possible things that children can be harmed doing versus what statistics say they are actually where they actually get injured. And so I just want you to keep that in mind as you are designing opportunities for your students to work in your making space, is think about how do I prepare the students with knowledge and experience to work safely in this space instead of preventing them from ever utilizing those tools to begin with. You need to decide with the group that you're working with, and you may work with multiple ages. So maybe with certain groups or certain students, you have different restrictions or different applications of the tool. But I want you to always be thinking in your mind, how could I make this more accessible to the students that I am working with? How could I make it possible for them to use this? A perfect example is the sewing machine. So the sewing machine, while Patrick is much more versed in using things like hand tools, the sewing machine is much more up my alley. And I hear people a lot talk about the dangers of what if you get your finger stuck in the sewing machine, which is always a possibility. That's always an option of something that could happen. But if you're properly using the sewing machine, the machine will pull the fabric through on its own. Your fingers and hands don't need to be anywhere near that needle. So if we supervise students in their use of the sewing machine and teach them how to use it properly, and we trust them to make decisions that will lead to their safety, then they are going to be able to apply that and be able to build on their skills and knowledge as they have continued experience with that tool. Perfect example is over the summer that we had preschool students utilizing the sewing machines. They made dinosaur tails for themselves. Some students actually sewed the material and guided it through the machine with their hands. Some students just pushed on the pedal with their hands while an adult directed the fabric through. Both students were having an experience with the sewing machine, and both of them saw the outcome of something that they were designing and making. So think about how can you make adaptations for the particular students that you are working with, and some of those adaptations may require adult volunteers. So include that in your thought process. Who can I ask to come and help and supervise? Who has experience with these types of tools and would be willing to assist these students in the use of them? So continually think about, how can I make this accessible? How can I make this safe? And how can I empower my students with the knowledge and the capability of utilizing these tools? So on that last thought, something to be thinking about is the extended need or the extreme need that we're beginning to see now for adults that have skills using tools in the trades, for example. And so what a great experience it would be for students to have experience using things like a sewing machine, using things like an oven or a stove, or learning how to use a saw or a drill. And as they get older, those may be the tools of their trade in a type of vocational training or even a continued career that they have utilizing those exact same tools. So always be thinking, how can I make this accessible to my students? Always keep safety in mind. Always keep that in the forefront, but continue to think of how can I let these students have use or access to these tools. So last thoughts, in case you have any other questions, Patrick is manning the computer, so if you have thoughts or questions, please feel free to share those. I would like to remind you of our future webinar dates. If you can, Erin, can you put it onto the computer? Thank you so much. Just a reminder of the future webinars that we have. We'll be having one in a month from now, again on Tuesdays from 4:30 to 6:30. And we'll be talking about how do you actually set up a makerspace? How do you design that? In January, we will have one looking specifically at technology, how to incorporate that with various age groups, utilizing the materials you have in your kit as well as maybe others that you might be using. And then our last one will be in February, and we're going to look at challenges and outcomes of maker education. What does that look like? How do we keep it going? If you ever have questions, please feed those to me and I can try to address those during the webinar. I'm happy to do that. And I will continue to bring projects with me to kind of demonstrate some ideas or suggestions of ways that you might use some of the materials in the kit. Patrick, do we have any questions or thoughts from the group?
We are good.
Okay, so be looking for, if you haven't already received the last of your materials that are with the kit, be looking for those to be coming soon, including the framework. It's important that you go through, if you haven't already, through your kit to make sure that you have everything. And if you have questions about something, what it is, or how you use it, that you connect with us, and we'll be happy to help you with that. So I look forward to seeing videos, pictures, amazing things that you're doing. Our Facebook page has been lit up lately with all kinds of ways that educators are using the Making STEM Connection Kit. Please continue to do that. It's great for you guys to see how other people are using the exact same materials that you have. I love hearing about if you're participating in STEM fairs or school activities where you're helping other people to have an experience in a maker space or see what that looks like. New materials that you're adding, additions to your kit. Love to hear that and pass that along to other people that are in our group. So, hashtag maker, make at Sci, and Sci for the Instagram page, and hashtag Sci Makers for our Twitter page. And I love to put things on there. I love to see other people hashtag and connect with that. All right. So have a great evening. Thanks for hanging out with us. And we look forward to seeing you next month to talk about maker spaces.